Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday.
Woohoo! I love Fridays.
Happy Writer's Backpack Day.
Yeah. Yeah. Fridays are I love Fridays. I actually think it's way more civilized to have a 4-day work week.
Totally. Don't you just feel better after a long weekend?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you're someone like you're watching the writer's adventure, so you're probably a writer, like having that extra day gives gives us time to like land. Like 2 days, we're just landing for heaven's sake. And then by Sunday, oh, if you're not disciplined, you're planning for Monday on Sunday. We need 3 days. Writers need time.
Totally. Everyone needs time.
Yeah. All right. So if you're new to the Writer's Backpack, this is where we talk about all the seemingly random things that are actually pretty important, supporting you. Oh, come on. What's that face?
Yeah, well, and it's also just like there's so much to talk about with writing. So
Yeah.
maybe Tina and I are just indulging ourselves here, but we really hope that we offer you food for thought, help you maybe get through some things you might come up against, and also know that you're not alone in a whole plethora of challenges.
Totally. Like that. Yep. So sometimes it might sound like, why are they talking about this? But at some point in your journey, you're like, oh, you know what? So and so said this thing, or I think Meribeth was trying to get at that. And writing is subtle. It's nuance. It's little,
Intuitive.
yeah, and it's gateways of yeses that you can't plan for. So they might seem, maybe they don't seem random to you. I don't know, but it's important to have as many tools in your belt as you can. Like I think it's like you can only write to, or you can only communicate, and this isn't a bad thing. It's just you can only communicate to the level of your vocabulary. You can only communicate to the level of your understanding of self. And it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be a big vocabulary or a big awareness of self, but the more you know, the more you can relate to other people. And I don't mean knowledge. I mean, like, the more you heart know, the more you can relate. So thanks for being here on the Writer's Backpack, where we talk about, I don't know, stuff we know and don't know. Oh, and that one, we have a big question today, didn't we?
We talk about stuff. Yeah, well, I think the thing that had kind of been on our mind was this idea of what stuff do you keep?
Right.
Stuffing her bags full of too much stuff.
Right. On Tuesday, we got into this. You had this tweet that came up for you, right? About this writer
The
who,
writer who said, I'm finding all this interesting stuff in my research. Should I just shove it into my piece and hope that my readers forgive me? Or should I like be good and leave it out?
that's like making a stew out of leftovers. Should I shove it all in and hope my kids will eat it? Yeah, it's a good question. I
And
think
so you used to be a stuffer, but you're learning the joy of more minimalism in your writing. Is that true, Tina?
I don't know that I'll ever be a minimalist, but I think I am learning the joy of being understood. I definitely think I'm a writer that packs shit in. And I think part of that is the way the way that story comes to me is multi-layered, and that's just how it works for me. But I think I'm getting braver around how much of myself I'm willing to expose. And I don't mean details. I mean, like, am I willing to actually say clearly what I want to say and potentially piss someone off, or potentially, just am I willing to say less to have more impact?
Cool.
I think it's vulnerability.
You're right. So when you've made those decisions, are you then taking some of that material and saving it for another piece, or what are you doing with that material?
Um, that's a great question. So I used to write everything longhand. And when I wrote everything longhand, I would keep everything. And now that I type almost everything, I only keep things that I feel resonance in. Like there's an impulse in it. Like I might, like on the adventure we talk about, we want you to get lost. Like we want you to get lost in the woods. And so sometimes I'm exploring stuff and I'll write stuff that has a real impulse in it. But then I realize that impulse later on isn't actually taking me closer to the impact, it's taking me further away. So if it has an impulse in it, I'll take it out and keep it in an old draft and start a new draft or something like that. But if it doesn't have an impulse to it, if I'm actually just prattling on, I just cut it because I can be descriptive, but this I don't have to keep description. You know? How about you?
Well, my thing is, I was in a conversation with someone today about a writing project that's been on my mind. I'm like, well, you see, I'm like a puppy dog. I get excited about everything. So when I find, I learn something new, and I'm like, oh, yeah, 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 I love that. Let's chase that ball. Let's chase that ball. And then I can really go off track. Which is why working at a newspaper was so good for me, because it was just like such solid barriers around me.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I learned from that little adventure was that whatever that piece that doesn't fit into your story is might actually be your next story.
I love that quote. In fact, I think I should write that on my wall. Like that's like one of those things you should walk into a coffee shop and see it on a writer's coffee shop wall. That thing that you're cutting might be your next story, or is probably your next story.
Yeah.
Or that thing that you don't want to cut, but you know you should because it doesn't serve, is actually your next story. Yeah, I love that. I also think that sometimes they're not necessarily your next story, but they're a scene that you need later, but you don't know. Because sometimes they're not as full of as a story, but there's something poignant about it. It's a moment, you know? Yeah. Why don't we offer some ideas about what people do with those things? Like one of my clients and one of the people who's been to our writing retreats is a poet. And so what they do is when they're in like the fourth draft and we're editing now, they cut things and put them at the bottom of it, like right at the end, so that they're never lost. And then when they move into the polished draft, they still have all that stuff for later. That's one way to do it.
Or, what I've actually been doing lately is I actually have spreadsheets for writing projects.
You do not. You
I
have
know.
spreadsheets?
That's the worst thing ever.
It's
Should I
shocking
should I
to
have
me.
not admitted that publicly?
No, I think it just doesn't make sense to me that you would have a wow, I would never have a spreadsheet.
Well, no, but it's just like I have one spreadsheet that is like every time I stumble upon something that brings up an idea,
Wow.
I have this whole column of ideas, and then I have like what the source is that tipped off that idea.
Okay,
And
that's the journalist in you. That's cool.
I don't know if that's cool, Tina. It's
I think it's cool. You've got the source.
well, the source, it's just like But then sometimes I'll have like another column and be like, okay, this is the person I want to interview on that.
Right. I love that. So our friend Nicole, it's different because it's usually for her, it's happening in the collecting stage. She has like a little index card box, right? And so she just files ideas, but we're actually talking about when you're in the throes of writing.
Okay, well, mine is more collecting stage too. I'd say
Oh,
mine is collecting stage.
okay.
But I think on that note, like on some level, maybe you're always collecting, right?
For sure. Yeah. You know, another thing that we've seen people do is when we walk people through a 5 draft structure, and and so when they move drafts, they can link back to in the comments section. We use Google Docs, so you can link back to a comment. You can comment and link back to a previous draft. See this and that's always interesting too, especially when you're in the place where you're editing, but you're like, this happens to me all the time when you're editing, but you haven't got the end right yet. And you just know the end's not right, and you don't want to cut things that you need, but you're not sure if it's right. And that's like making a stew and you're not sure if you got the right spices in. And so that's always a good trick, is to bump it down to the bottom, but maybe in your comment section tag it so you can come back to it.
I mean, I think the drafts are critical too, right? Because you never really axe anything. All the info is there.
Yeah. Never write over a previous draft.
And you know what? I feel like I've read some really good things on this. So I'm gonna just, after we're done here, I'm gonna try and find some cool little articles to just expand upon this conversation.
Okay, so we've talked about the editing side, but let's talk about the stuffing side. Like, she asked a question. She was like, do I just stuff it in? Like, let's talk about stuffing.
Oh, well, I think if you stuff it in, you just have to accept that the whole thing is going to change shape.
Tell me more.
Well, you think about your suitcase, right? You're counting on a certain amount of flexibility.
Oh.
Right? But the same thing as with your work, with your writing, it's like the story itself will change shape a little bit to meet the contours of whatever that idea or fact or whatever tidbit is.
Wow.
It might be a little bit more lumpy, right?
I like that. Yeah, I think it's a great exercise to read other people's work and notice if they're stuffers, if they're leaners. Meribeth and I did a readers boot camp or something a number of summers ago, and we read Roxane Gay's Hunger. And that was the first time I'd encountered her writing. And it's so sparse. It's so sparse. And it's just interesting to play with that. When I think about Andre Agassi's book, Open, I would say he's a stuffer. He's a stuffer with a really great editor. James, who's in the Writer's Adventure, is absolutely a stuffer, for sure. He's a romantic. He symphonic. There's he's a stuffer. And there's nothing wrong with stuffing or cutting. It's just knowing what
it's a style choice.
Yeah.
And for readers, you might enjoy reading stuffers, but also, there's different challenges too, right?
Totally. And I would say ask yourself about the impact you want your paragraph or chapter or book to have, and to help you decide. Does it take you closer to your impact or further away? Yeah. All right. Shall we head out and come back for a little writing time?
Yeah.
All right, everybody.
Well, we're going to come back with our prompts and stuff to just really keep you off.
Okay. Have a great Friday. We will see you on Tuesday. Oh, actually, we'll see you in 15 minutes. Ciao.
Bye.